Bills.
Yep.
Which, again, like quicksand, not a thing. I mean, I really thought it was going to be an issue, and it's just not. Like those, I don't think I've ever seen an anvil.
No, I was very scared of quicksand as a kid because it seemed to be in like every movie and cartoon. And I was like, at some point in my life, I'm going to encounter quicksand, and I'm going to have to know not to try to struggle and to just let it,
happen.
Just to let it happen so that I'll be able to free myself. And I feel like we even talked about it in school as if they were like prepping us for the day that this would happen. And it never, I mean, knock on wood. No quicksand yet.
Especially like Neverending Story, which is a movie that I hate that everybody else loves. I
really love it though, or is it just like a nostalgic thing?
I don't know, but I don't even have nostalgia about it. I hated it when I was a kid. I hated it now. I'm not a fan. But when the horse is in the quicksand and he's just like, I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stand here. And I'm like, well, that's what he was taught. We were all taught that. So the horse is not wrong. But
true.
My God, that's a devastating. I don't like that. That's probably the whole reason I didn't like the movie. I was just like, well, that's really sad. So I don't care for that. Real quick before we keep going, on our break, Mr. Producer had a fun fact about quicksand. I feel like we need to know it.
Well, fact may be a little strong of a word because I was looking up this so-called fact of mine, and I can't necessarily find the proof of it, but I remember.
I'm shocked.
That doesn't mean that proof doesn't exist, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I remember years ago reading or hearing, there's I don't know who, there's probably multiple lists out there, but somebody does a list of like the top fears of like a generation or a country, or, there's probably all kinds of different demographics. But I remember hearing that quicksand was for years was consistently in like the top 5 fears of Americans. It was like
bizarre.
Public speaking, snakes, spiders, common stuff, and then quicksand. And it's because of how prominent it was in movies and television. And if you look it up now, what you're going to find is a bunch of articles about how it used to be super big in movies and TV and how a lot of people used to be afraid of it, and it's not so much anymore. There's a bunch of stuff out there about that, but so I couldn't exactly find the exact, poll or whatever, but I remember hearing it. I mean, it could have been on the radio. It could have been something I read.
Where does quicksand even exist?
Very few places, and when you look it up, I couldn't even find a name for the fear of quicksand because that's how uncommon it is. So there's a name for a fear of walking on sand, and they kind of use that for the fear of quicksand.
That's totally different though, because that would be more of like someone who doesn't like the feeling of it. Or
I'm sure there's a name for it, but when you search for it, the first things that come up are not actually fear of quicksand. So I'm sure there's a name, but that's how uncommon quicksand is. It's extremely uncommon. And it's a very irrational fear, but man, they love to put it in movies and television and cartoons and things. And there's entire generations of people that are terrified of quicksand.
Well, apparently it exists in Southern California, according to the internet. So I guess it does exist some places in the U.S.
Well, I just looked up, and it's like the definition of where it can be found. Quicksand can be found in places where there is grainy soil, including riverbanks, marshes, lake shores, beaches, and areas near underground springs. So everywhere. Yeah. That can be found everywhere.
But I think quicksand deep enough to actually like engulf a human being is extremely rare. Because those riverbanks and things, you're going to sink like a foot, like it might cover your shoes up.
Right. This is interesting though. I found this news article from this woman who was walking her horse.
And,
as you do.
It is the actual never-ending story. I'm going to be upset.
Yeah, and it says that she found patches of quicksand for about 30 feet. She said we were surrounded by quicksand. I mean, it doesn't say that anything happened though.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Honestly, Indiana Jones for me. Like I grew up with Indiana Jones, and there's quicksand, and it messed me. I was afraid of quicksand too.
Quicksand and Jumanji. I mean, like
Jumanji,
isn't all of our like.
Okay, this says if quicksand isn't shallow enough for you to hit bottom, you'd eventually float because, you're not as. Why did it just refresh all of a sudden? That's nice. Because you're not as dense as the sand. So it's not like movies where they show nothing but a hat left, is what this person was saying.
But what if you're floating? What if it gets above your head and that's when you start to float? Like, right? I don't know that I need to actually have this conversation. I'm never going to run into quicksand, but...
It does say that someone was stuck for 12 hours in quicksand near this lake in the 90s. And this lake in Southern California.
Think how much media it was in though, like Princess Bride,
it was in
Neverending Story, Star Wars. Like I think it's actually the new Star Wars movies.
Like
it was, yeah.
Tarzan.
I remember it like Johnny Quest cartoons,
like Western movies. Like there was quicksand.
Oh yeah,
like
yep.
It was crazy. It was like literally in everything. Like there wasn't like some kind of any adventure movie you watch had some kind of quicksand scene in it.
But isn't it interesting how it's a lot of the time it's like the quicksand is in the desert, but in that article that I was reading, I had like the definition.
It would be near like
it has to be near water.
Water, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, which makes more sense. I think a lot of times it was like in jungles too. Like it makes more sense for me to see it in like Tarzan or like Princess Bride. I don't know where they are in that movie, but they're running through the woods, which makes it seem a little more like realistic that they might encounter it, but